John McCain went on CNN over the weekend and gave us an idea of what his plan is to fight terrorism.
This is the same organization these people are trained from that the President of the United States said Yemen and Somalia were success stories. When we didn't leave a sustaining force behind in Iraq, and when the President turned down the advice of his head national security advisors not to arm the Free Syrian Army, and a number of other decisions that laid the groundwork for ISIS. And now we have a situation where the largest extremist caliphate in history is now in Iraq and Syria, and we have no strategy. We have no strategy to degrade or defeat it.
Well, you are calling for a coherent strategy to combat this global terrorist movement, which we're clearly witnessing. But what would that be? Would that be more boots in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen? What would that coherent strategy look like, Senator?
Well, first of all, it would require some some boots on the ground.
Wow. She was crystal clear in that question. She said, would that require boots on the ground in, and then she lists off like every country in the world except Greenland. She's like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Pakistan, Somalia. He's like, yeah, boots on the ground, rock and roll, let's do it. You want to invade all those countries? You want to invade all those countries? How far away have we gotten from the basic principle of only time you use violence is for self-defense against an imminent threat against the nation? I mean, that principle is long gone. It's dead. It's underground. It's spit on. It's pissed on. It's shit on. That's the only standard that ever made sense to me, but we don't even pretend in America to have a standard anymore. Never mind hawks like John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They're like, no, rock and roll all day long. She was very clear. Should we do boots on the ground in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, all these different places, all the places she mentioned? He's like, yes. Okay, John, you're not very good at this thing called logic, are you? Because we've been in Iraq, we've been in Afghanistan, we've been doing the war on terror for over 13 years. And what has the result been? There are now more terrorists today and more terrorist organizations. That's a fact. There have been many studies on this. We talk about it every day on the show, how the CIA refers to this stuff as blowback. It's the unintended consequences of an interventionist foreign policy. There was another study which came up with the term the Iraq effect, and they highlighted how because we've killed so many civilians in all these places, we have radicalized them. We have radicalized these places. It's so much easier for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or ISIS to step in and make an argument to these young disaffected youths when it was a U.S. drone or a U.S. soldier that accidentally killed their grandma or accidentally killed their nephew or their buddy. They would have been moderate to the U.S. and neutral on the question beforehand and not given a shit, but then when you kill people they know, and there were over 200,000 civilians killed in the Iraq War, that's the most conservative figure, that makes them go, fuck it! Give me an AK-47. I'm getting involved in this thing. And John McCain's answer is more of the problem. His solution is what's creating more of the problem. John, you missed the point completely. And then also, when he says, well, we made a mistake when we didn't arm the FSA. He's talking about the Free Syrian Army. Look, that comment alone shows how little John McCain really knows about the Middle East, which is why it's horrendous that he's one of the leading voices talking about Middle East issues and talking about foreign policy issues, is that he knows very little about it. Because if he knew the slightest bit about it, if he'd been reading any of the articles coming out over the past 4 months, he would have learned that there are no more moderates in Syria. Everybody who was part of the FSA is gonzo. They left. They went to Turkey and they went to Europe. The only people left fighting against Assad in Syria are jihadists. ISIS, that's where they started. So this idea that I bet you he doesn't even know the breakdown of Sunni Shiite in the region. John McCain was calling for war with Assad louder than anybody else. But then a year later, he was calling for war with ISIS. Well, which is it, big guy? Because when we were talking about intervening and knocking out Assad, we were talking about arming Sunni militants in the region. Sunni militants including ISIS! Do you not get this? That you can't say, oh, I want to topple Assad, the Shiite Alawite leader of Syria, right? And at the same time say, I also want to topple the people who are going to topple Assad. So you just want to kill everybody in the region. But that doesn't make any sense. I don't think he knows. I don't think, if you ask John McCain, what is Bashar Assad? He would say, like, okay, dictator of Syria, yada, okay, great, but what is he? What is he? I don't think he knows. I don't think he could tell you he's a Shiite. I don't think he could tell you he's an Alawite. I don't think he could tell you these things. I don't think he could tell you that the FSA are Sunni, and I don't think he could tell you that ISIS is Sunni. I don't think he knows that there's a natural alliance there. And people attack me when I say this, but it's not me saying it. Look at there were articles that came out right when Obama said, okay, we're going to arm the FSA. There were articles that came out days later that said that the FSA made a pact with ISIS and said we won't fight each other for now because we have a common enemy, that enemy being Assad. But John McCain's like, arm more people in the Middle East. How about we arm, you ready for this? Nobody in the Middle East. Crazy idea. Crazy, right? I know I'm just a wild man like that. How about we arm nobody, because every time we ever arm anybody, it always comes back to bite us in the ass. It was Ronald Reagan who created Al-Qaeda. It was Ronald Reagan who created the Mujahideen, because he gave the arms and the funding to Osama bin Laden, because Osama bin Laden at the time was fighting the Soviet Union. And we abided by the ridiculous idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So yeah, finance the radical jihadis and give them weapons, because this won't come back to bite us in the ass later. The same fucking mistake that Ronald Reagan made is the same mistake that John McCain is cheerleading for today, and he's oblivious to it. Enough of these people who don't know anything about foreign policy talking about foreign policy. The American people don't want any more war, and war is not making the situation better. And we also don't want to arm half the fucking world, because eventually those weapons are going to be turned on us.